Hello everyone, I'm John Maxine. Today I'm joined by Ms. Rourke, and we're going to talk about the state budget. What is the current status of the state budget?
Pennsylvania state budget has not been resolved yet, so we're now in our 5th or 6th month without any state subsidies flowing to the public school districts. Because the state budget is not resolved, they cannot release any federal dollars, any state dollars. Here in Norristown, we get about $30 million in subsidies from the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and about $6 million from the federal government. Most of that is not flowing, so it's creating a cash flow problem for us.
Is there a new budget proposed and voted on each year?
It's an annual process. Just like the school district creates a budget every year, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania has to create a budget every year. Typically, the budget is done, early July, so it's well past its deadline.
Why has there been so much controversy and talk surrounding the state budget this time around?
I think that, Governor Wolf came into office with some really aggressive ideas, and he hasn't had much luck getting any traction or support from them, for them. He wanted to tax Marcellus Shale, didn't really go anywhere. He wanted to increase the personal income tax in Pennsylvania. Didn't get any movement on that. Most recently, he wanted to increase the sales tax. Couldn't pull that off. So, it's still in negotiations. What he's trying to do is to create new revenue sources to fund public education better than it had been funded in previous administrations. So, that's a great thing. Mm-hmm. It's just that none of his ideas, he can't get support for them.
Has the proposed state budget been voted on at all yet?
It is not. It is not. There's still negotiations. And honestly, every day the situation kind of changes in Harrisburg. Some days at the end of the day we hear positive news and you look like it's going to be resolved, and then the next day or later that night you get an email saying the whole thing blew up, and just stay tuned.
Okay. Now, I know last week it was proposed to possibly get rid of the property tax and install a higher sales tax. Was that approved, or was that gotten rid of?
Eventually wasn't approved and is now off the table again. The most recent things that we've heard this week is that instead of increasing the sales tax, he wanted to raise it from like 6%, which it is now, to over 7%, which, he got a lot of pushback about that. The talk this week is about expanding the tax base, so expanding what's taxable. So there's lots of things that aren't taxable in Pennsylvania, so he was now considering expanding the base so that someone, would pay tax on more items.
Can the state keep going at the rate it is without a budget?
Honestly, I don't see how much longer we can go without a budget. It's just bad for everybody. It's terrible for public education, but it's also really bad for social services. I just also think it's really bad for the climate and the environment in our state.
Now, what does this all mean specifically for the Norristown Area School District?
So again, most of our federal subsidies are being withheld. There's a few small line items that don't funnel through the Pennsylvania Department of Education, and some of those are flowing, very, very small though. But the bigger piece is that no state dollars are coming here, so none of the subsidies that are used to support public education are flowing. So we've done a lot of things to, again, try to manage the cash flow problem that we have. We instituted a spending freeze in September already, when we knew that it was just the problems were starting to come. Over the summer, actually, we started paying vendors slowly. Typically vendors want to be paid in 30 days. Well, in the summer, we were like 60 to 90 days. Then we caught up a little bit. Now we're back to like 60 to 90 days. Some vendors aren't even getting paid, in a 90-day time frame, because we're really trying to just drag out the cash as long as we can. So, we've got slow pay strategy going on. We instituted a spending freeze in September for non-essential items. Okay. So our principals and our department heads are being forced to spend very carefully and only order what is essential to, the programs for that week or for that month. Mm-hmm. We're really not doing any long-term purchasing right now. Let's see, we also, early in the year, I made a decision not to pay charter schools. The school district spends about $7 million on charter schools. We're treating them, a little bit differently. They're not on the slow pay cycle. They're actually on the no pay cycle right now. And we know they're struggling as well. But we just honestly couldn't afford, with the challenges that we have, to pay charter schools.
So charter schools have no money coming into them at all right now?
Some districts are paying charter schools. So charter schools get all their money from local public school districts. Okay. Some of them, that have better cash flow and that have not been impacted impacted as significantly as Norristown, they're still paying charter schools. But, for a couple of reasons, we have just chosen not to. We just don't have the large cash reserves that some of our wealthier neighbor districts have. So we're just trying to, again, manage cash flow right now. We are also not running our 21st Century After School program. The contract for that got tied up at the Department of Education. We couldn't get it approved, so that's not running at all. Typically that starts running in like September, October. And most recently we decided to discontinue or temporarily suspend the adult evening school. So the adult evening school that runs out of the high school has been suspended because of the funding problem. The money for that program all comes from the federal and state government, and because we're not getting it, we just couldn't afford to continue to pay the employees and to run the program.
And what does this mean for Norristown Public Services?
Well, if you just look specifically at the adult evening school, the adults in our community, that was a service that many of them benefited from. So they're not able to get that service from the district anymore. I know that some of the other social agencies in Montgomery County and specifically in Norristown, they have not been getting funding from Harrisburg either. And honestly, there's a few that have already shut down. You've got offices for the aging and, some welfare agencies that they just didn't have a choice. They couldn't borrow the money. They couldn't, make payroll. So they've had to really, shut back services. And that is just a shame.
What is the next step for the Norristown School District if the budget?
Well, if it's not resolved soon, we told the school board, that we would come back and talk about it in the month of February. More than likely, if it's not resolved, we're going to be discussing either instituting some really, severe furloughs and, shutting down programs.
Is that the worst case scenario?
Yeah, that is worst case, because honestly, the other option in February would be to borrow money, and I think that everyone would advocate for borrowing money rather than, further harming our programs. The problem is when you borrow money, you have to pay an additional cost for interest. So we're just adding expenses to the district, which we didn't anticipate. But I think, again, that everyone would advocate borrow rather than shut anything else down. Yeah. Right.
Have there been any talks about a possible resolution in sight?
So again, it's a very fluid situation. I read an article today from Harrisburg that Governor Wolf said absolutely positively that it was close and that he anticipated being resolved by Christmas.
Do you have anything else you'd like to add?
No, there's lots of information on our website about what we've done, the strategies that we've implemented to manage during the crisis.
And what's the name of the website again?
www.nasd.k12.pa.us. And the most important thing people can do is contact their legislators. Call them, text them, stop and see them. They need to know that the Norristown community needs the budget resolved.
All right. Thank you for talking to me today.
You're welcome.
Good? Good. Well, thank you for joining me today, Ms. Rourke. I'm John Maxey, and I just talked to Ms. Rourke about the state budget. Now back to the Eagle's Eye.